All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alice. I'm the school community liaison for the Falmouth Regional School District, and I'm excited to bring you Assistive Technology with Sarah Valley. Sarah, take it away.
So we're going to talk a little bit about assistive technology and assistive technology across the day. And one of the things that has come up for lots of people as a question is it cheating? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanism for determining how we select assistive technology to support people in living their lives the best that they can. And how it is used in different settings, and show you a little bit video of what it is, and then also just sort of do some talking and show you a cool tool that I use when I'm making some decisions. So this is the HAAT model, or the Human Activity and Assistive Technology model. And this model is what we're going to spend some time talking about today, where when we're selecting assistive technology and we're talking about what assistive technology is, we're always keeping in mind who the human is, what they have the capacity for physically, cognitively, emotionally. Are they a novice at an activity or an expert at that activity? And then I think it's really important to also be thinking about this middle section, which is the context, which is what is their social connection? What's their family connection? What place and space will they be using any of this assistive technology, and all of those pieces, what kind of supports they have, and those kinds of things. The activity that we'll talk a little bit about today, aside from education, are self-care, productivity, and leisure, because those components are really important for all of our community members, whether or not you're a student or you are a young child, or you're a mom or a grandparent, or whether you live at home or in a facility. All of those components play a role, and assistive technology to support all of those things is important. So, and then we will also talk about assistive technology and what the interface is. Is it computer? Is it a physical thing? What kind of technology are you using? So I want to go back to this model and spend a little bit of time talking about this on a bigger level. So when we think about in school, I'm going to talk a little bit about in school, and then at home, and then perhaps some about people who may be in elder.
And Sarah, are these the different contexts that we're talking about, right?
Yeah. So in the world, there's people who need physical help, whether that's a cane, which technically is a piece of assistive technology. So assistive technologies does not have to mean that it works with batteries or electricity. It can be low tech, which is anything that doesn't need to be plugged in. So if you think about different things that we have in our kitchen. So it may be that someone's hands are too arthritic to open things, and we use the grips to open jars, or we use an electric can opener, or those kinds of things can be considered assistive technology to support people who have physical needs. When we think about people who have cognitive needs or learning needs, it's really important to think about all of the different gamuts. So many of us are not great at math, or we may have a math disability, and we would use a calculator, or there are talking calculators too, where you can talk into it. Now we use AI a lot, and we might say, Siri, give me the answer to, and it will give you the answer to those problems.
I like to ask Alexa to set a timer while I'm cooking because my hands are full.
Yes. Yes. And speaking of cooking, there's a lot of different devices that support people with different disabilities on cooking. For example, sometimes when we're thinking about people who might have memory issues, there may be a dial that is attached to the power that goes to the stove. And so the stove can only be turned on for a set amount of time, and then the power goes off to the whole stove. And that can help people maintain their independence without being at risk of starting a fire. So there's all sorts of different types of technology that can be helpful for people. So other pieces around the cognitive and learning needs that people may have, I think over the last 20 years, we've had a huge amount of growth in the understanding of the different needs that people have around accessing content and accessing information. And at Fall Mountain, we have a system of making sure our students have accessible educational materials. But aside from that, our community libraries have really done a great job, and that has started at the national level and moved to states and local libraries. And that really came about around this awareness that when people have disabilities that maybe impact their ability to read print, so whether it's being blind and needing braille or auditory information, whether it's sometimes we'll have people who have attention challenges. And so following along and reading and staying focused can be really difficult. And sometimes we have people who have visual tracking challenges. And so staying on the right line and tracking what you're reading gets confusing because their eyes jump to lines. Or maybe you need large print. A lot of us remember the large print Reader's Digests that you could get, and they had the giant print. Well, now you can access all of those things in a national library of digital text. And there's pretty much, I think it's, every text that has been published, including textbooks for college, including magazines, and in some bigger newspapers are all available through this national accessible educational materials. Yes, Alice.
So that's not so much the local library, although they do have good materials there.
Yes. So at Fall Mountain for students, we use something called Bookshare, which allows us to do that. In the local libraries, they have different ways of providing that for people. So you can check out audiobooks, you can check out digital books, or you can also get subscriptions to digital newspapers and magazines and things that you can then use a screen reader to have read out loud to you. And I think that one of the things that was a positive that came out of COVID and the pandemic was there was an increase in funding and support for getting more of those kinds of accessible books to people within the community. So that has really increased, and it's a pretty simple process. You can go to your local public library, or you can actually do it from home. You need to have a library card, and then there's a couple of apps you need to download, and the local librarians are amazing at walking people through how to do that. And then you just log into the library page and you can check out an audiobook or a digital book, and the digital books can be read aloud to you. And the audiobooks are often read aloud by actors. So they're done with voice and stuff. And some people have subscriptions to Audible, which is wonderful. But if that is a financial barrier, because that's a real piece, and if you have a family of kids who all want to be reading, an Audible is $15 a month for one book. The public libraries have hundreds of them for free. And so you can check them out and listen to them. I do, however, have to say sometimes I get a little challenged when there's a series and they have a different reader reading one of the books in a series, and I'm like, that's not right.
So we're thinking about audiobooks right now, and I enjoy them so much for leisure and while I'm driving. What are some of the reasons that people would be using audiobooks?
So we have a variety of different things. So sometimes it's people who have visual impairments. Sometimes it's people who have comprehension challenges or learning disabilities, or have maybe, if you're an older adult, had a stroke or some kind of an accident that would impact your ability to fluently read and read for comprehension. So sometimes we have, I'm gonna talk about students for a minute, because at one point everyone who is an adult was a student. So I'll just talk in the context of students. So we have students who may have a variety of different types of needs related to reading. Sometimes we have students who struggle to decode and they have a hard time sounding out words. And we have students who sometimes can decode beautifully and read big, long words, but they don't have the comprehension of what those words mean. So they don't understand all of the words that they mean. Sometimes we have students who understand the individual words, but they have difficulty with language structure and the sentence structure. And when you mix those things together, so you're struggling to sound a word out, you're struggling to understand and have comprehension of the words, or you're struggling to have comprehension of the sentence structure, or all three, you're using a whole lot of working memory, and it removes that ability to read a book for fun and leisure and escapism, because if it's work to read, then you miss that joy of reading. And so in the world of assistive technology, we talk about reading with our ears, because really reading is about getting the content, right? So of course, when we have students who struggle with reading, we have people who are specialists who are teaching them how to read, right? But, or and, not but, and we also have a very important need to make sure that those students get access to all the information that their peers are getting access to. So if they want to take a psychology class and learn about the information in psychology, but they can't sound those larger words out, then they can listen to that and get the same information as their peers who are reading print.
Right, like learning how to read is one thing, but answering questions about what happened in Hatchet is a different skill, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so giving people access to the information is really important. And there's also technology now that allows students to even listen to math read out loud. So it'll read an equation out loud. It'll read, and so that can be helpful just for processing things. Um, and then so all of that component around accessing information, if you are a person who struggled with reading your whole life, and you know that there are these magazines out there and that you would like to read, but you never buy them because you know that trying to read those articles is going to be tough. There's ways to get access to those and be able to listen to those articles. Now, the other piece that I think is really important for people to understand is that there are different ways that assistive technology helps with the access to reading. So there's the human read, and then there's digitally read, where the computer reads it out loud, and you can change the voice just like Alexa or your navigation on your phone. Like my Siri is a British man. I don't, and you can change all of those things. Um, when you use a digital tool, you can also speed up or slow down the rate that it is read, that the computer is reading to you. And when I teach students how to use these tools, I spend a bit of time on this because it's really important to understand that you can listen to something that you know a whole lot about. So say you really want to learn more about deer hunting, and there's a magazine all about hunting, and it has all kinds of tips and tricks, but you know all the language and the vocabulary about that. You know what they're talking about when they're talking about all the different tools you might use or the places you might go. And you could probably listen to an article from a hunting magazine that at a much faster rate, because you're not learning new vocabulary, you're listening to something that you have prior knowledge to. But if you are listening to something like directions on how to rebuild a carburetor, then and there's foreign language to you, or different, not foreign, but different vocabulary, you may need to go in and slow that down because your brain needs more time to process the information. So I spend a lot of time talking to students about the importance of learning how to go into your tools and make sure that they're set up for not only how your brain works when you learned how to use it, but how it is working and processing whatever you're reading, right? So if you're listening to a fun book that's a mystery at home, you might speed it up. But if you're listening to your social studies book that you know you're going to have to take a test on, you probably want to slow that down. And so there's a whole lot of different tools. So I want to talk a little bit more about not necessarily reading things, but writing pieces too, and some other executive functioning kinds of tools too, because a lot of us need to use some of those tools. And I'll, jokingly say, especially as we age, those executive functioning and memory tools are really important. So we also have access to on our phones. We have assistive technology for writing. Lots of people don't necessarily turn them on, or we know they're there and we don't necessarily use them. So when you go to type a text, you'll see that predictive text pop up on the bottom. If you try to spell a word and it's not quite right, it will fix it. You also have the ability to speak to your computer or your phone, and it will type what it is that you're trying to say. We have that same capacity to a greater extent on computers. So again, I'll talk about students, but knowing that these tools are available for us in the world of work. And I'm just going to put a little plug in here there's a wonderful website. It's called Ask Jan, ask.jan.net. I believe it's a .net. And it's the Job Accommodation Network. And there's federal laws around if you have a documented disability, that your place of work by law needs to provide you with what's called reasonable accommodation so you can do that job. So if you are a person who struggles with spelling and writing because that's how your brain works, and you have a disability that impacts your ability to quickly write out a whole sentence, but you could talk it out, then your job would be required to provide you with this kind of assistive technology that could help you do written work. So we have software that allows students to type using predictive text. So they would type a first few letters, and then it can pop in the words for them. And the beauty is you can also set up kind of word lists or topic lists. So if you are a student who has to write a paper about cellular division, and you go in and say, I need a topic list that says all the vocab for cellular division, it will predict those kinds of words faster for you. So it makes it a little easier. It doesn't do the writing for you. You need to know what your thought process is.
Yes, I was going to ask if that's, you started the presentation with, is it cheating? So
Yeah.
having access to the words is what I'm hearing.
It's not, because really it's just a list of vocab words. You need to know your sentence structure, the meaning of those words. You need to know the meaning of the order that you're putting them into the sentence to communicate what it is that you are trying to share. It's literally giving you access to, how do I get these words spelled onto my computer in a faster way. If you're a person who, say, is missing some fingers, this is a really great way to use the tools because you only have to type a few keys. We also have dictation software, which is where you talk to the computer and it types. So you can write a whole essay by talking. When I teach students how to use this, I'm very, very careful to say that you have to make sure that you're thinking about what we call code switching, and the fact that when we talk to our parents, we talk one way. When we talk to our peers, we talk another way. When we are speaking, we use very informal language. And when we are writing, we use formal language with proper syntax and sentence structure and all of word structure. And you don't say cause, you have to say because. And And you have to plan what you're going to say because your teacher is going to grade it in a formal language manner. So I often teach students that if you're going to dictate your paper or your answers, that you should go back and have the computer read it aloud to you to make sure that what it put in there was as formal as you intended it to be. And so what is really important is sometimes we have people who feel like they cannot do things. They cannot apply for a job. They don't know how to fill this form out. They cannot, I can't do that. I can't figure out how to read that form and fill that out. I'm not even going to bother applying for that job or thinking about going to college or whatever it is. And you can use a combination of these tools to read forms out loud to you and to dictate or use word prediction to fill in the answers on we call accessible PDFs. And at Fall Mountain, we have software that allows students to do all of those pieces. And in fact, an important caveat is to know that all of our colleges by law have all of this technology available to students who have disabilities. And so the benefit of learning how to use them when you're young is that you can carry that knowledge into the world of college or work.
And for that matter, we're required to as well, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's not an extra thing that we're spending money on for fun.
Yeah.
It is, and yeah, you can talk more
Yes.
about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, so we are required to provide all of those kinds of things to students who have documented disabilities, which would be in an IEP or a 504 plan. As a district, we made a very conscious choice to provide these pieces of software as a universal design tool. So they're available on all of the Chromebooks. We're a one-to-one district. So that is really helpful. And I teach upon request. I can teach whole classes how to use the software. And that's really helpful in that it just allows the students who need them to feel less stigma about using them. And it allows the students who maybe are really exhausted to use them once in a while. If you're really tired and you're just feeling like, oh, I don't want to sit here and do my homework, they can use some of these tools to help them. So that is important. And then I think the other piece is I'm a speech pathologist, so I'm talking about more of the language components, but it's also really important to talk about the physical components and the physical and our occupational therapists and our physical therapists and our recreational therapists use a lot of assistive technology to support our students who have different kinds of physical needs to be able to do all of the things that they want to do. So for example, we may have students who have fine motor challenges and they have adapted scissors or they have weights on their pencils to help them to be able to write, or they have larger pencils with big grips, and those help our students who have trouble gripping things. We may have students who need adapted spoons and forks that are bent a certain way because a student may not have the same mobility as someone else does. And so feeding can be something that needs some assistive technology. We have a number of students across our district and our country who have attentional or sensory needs. And so there are a number of assistive technology tools we use for those. And there's a lot of reasons why kids might have sensory needs. It could be because they're on the autism spectrum. It could be because they were born prematurely and that comes along with nervous system differences. It could be because they were born with substances in their bodies and that changes your neurological system. Yeah.
I wanted to see if you would speak for a moment about headphones.
Yes.
More people are wearing headphones these days, and it's not necessarily a matter of being rude or tuning the world out, right?
Yes. So, yeah, that's really important. So sensory components might be your body and needing help to sit still or be able to move so that you don't have to sit still and your brain can focus. And sometimes you'll see students who are wearing colored sort of sunglasses, and that helps filter out the brightness of lights and helps them to be able to focus, because bright lights might hurt their eyes or make it difficult to focus to read. In fact, there's some students who may have different colored overlays that go over their papers that help them to read. Uh, and then there are some students who are very sensory overloaded by sound, and sounds that someone else may not hear can be very irritating, or sounds that we are used to tuning out can be very irritating to their nervous system. And so there's a variety of different tools that people use. Some people use earplugs that go in your ear and actually narrow your ear canal so they filter out background noise, but not all of the sound. So they can hear they can hear the teacher or the person that's in front of them better. I think we have some students who use ones that are called Zounds. We have some students who use the loop ones, different. And then there's also students who wear headphones. And if you think about, when you're mowing your lawn, you put those big headphones on. Those are not what I'm talking about. There's specific ones that are created. There's a company that is called Baby Bands. There's a few other companies, and they're made for people to be listening to music with headphones on. So they filter out enough of the sound that it's not harmful, but you can still hear what people are saying. And so sometimes we as adults have a perception that a child isn't listening to us or is listening to music, right? Because now we have all these headphones that are Bluetooth and kids can listen to music. There's very specific ones that don't do that, but that help to block out background noise. They block out the sound of the heater or the lights humming or all of those things. Yeah. Again, one of the things I work on as an assistive technology specialist is really working with students on understanding. And I think adults and college students and people in the world of work, and that's where I talk about that Ask Jan website, and there's other, places, but that you can look, but thinking about how do we know what we need? What do we need? What's a preference? What's a need? What's something that helps us be able to do our job? And our job could be being a student, our job could be working at McDonald's, our job could be, working in an office that has a lot of background noise. Our job could be anything. And what do we need to be able to be successful in that and to not be overstimulated in a sensory way and to be able to do that job? Because while there's a lot of accommodations, you still need to be able to do the job or do the work that you are, being asked to do. And so figuring out how to use the accommodations well and appropriately and clearly say, this is why I use these, or this is why I need these things, is really important component. So let's see, where was I at? There's a lot of people in the world right now who are really struggling with some emotional components and stress and anxiety, and all of those pieces. And there's a number of assistive technology tools that can support people in that. And you may see any number of little things that you don't necessarily understand that someone is using as a tool. Alice has a fidget. So some people use fidgets. Some people have calm strips, which are stickers that have sort of a sensory component. They're bumpy and they just kind of help a person to ground themselves for a moment. So if they're having a little bit of anxiety, there's strategies that mental health professionals have taught them to use. And some of those tools might be find something you see or feel or smell or whatever. And so people who have those strategies in their assistive technology toolbox may be using them and you don't even realize they're using them. So there's people who carry worry stones. There's people who have a wristband, elastics on their wrist and they snap them.
Oh, a stone is technology, but it is though, in this case.
Yeah. There's all kinds of things. So it's not uncommon for us to see students who have some kind of a fidget attached to their bag or their belt loop or whatever it is. And that thing, you may not know. It may look like to you like that's a strange thing for an adult to be having, carrying around. And it doesn't really matter. You don't need to understand it because that person understands it and is using that tool in the moment to help them to calm and to center and be able to focus. And I think that that's another really important thing. So there is a caveat to that, and that all of these tools, I talked a little bit earlier about, require that we know how to, we can self-identify what we need. We can self-advocate for what we need. And then there's a component of appropriate use of those tools and making sure that we are using them in a way that doesn't really disrupt the rest of the people around you who are learning or working or doing, and so it may be that a person has to experiment and they buy a fidget and it's a clicky loud thing, and that hits somebody else's sensory piece, and so that maybe that's not the best tool. We have to find a different one. And so there's a lot of process in this, and which I am going to also talk about. And I know
I've asked you a bunch of questions to sidetrack you, so thank you for.
No, it's
for-
good. It's
yeah.
good. So I think that I want to go back to talking about for a quick second that no matter what the activity is, so recreation is a really big piece that I think is really, really important and we don't talk enough about. So in the world of school, we talk a lot about academic success and social success and how we manage all of those pieces. I think that recreation and leisure is another area that is really important to think about assistive technology. So one of my dear friends is a person who um, may have commandeered my dog to support her in teaching adapted skiing, and the dog would sit on the front, and there's adapted ski things that a wheelchair can click on. And so, and also may have taken my dog kayaking sometimes in adapted kayaks that are on a wider pontoon piece. And so there's all kinds of ways that people can engage in leisure that we don't necessarily think about. And I'm having a mind blank right now, but there's a place in Sullivan, New Hampshire that has beautiful wheelchair accessible hiking trails, and and it's a woman who, I wish I could find it in my brain right now, but she was in an accident and is in a chair, and she decided that she was going to shift gears and turn her property that she owns into an outdoor connection place for people who may not always have access to that. There's also the Veterans Association has a number of trails in Massachusetts, and they're kind of starting to come up into New Hampshire and Vermont, and you can actually rent from them a beautiful accessible bike that you can pedal with your hands or your feet. So if you don't have the capacity to use your feet to pedal a bike or to walk, you can use your hands to pedal this really cool, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a really cool thing. And so you can go and hike trails that you may not otherwise be able to. And that's a really important piece that we take students often with our recreational therapist to bowl, and there's adapted bowling tools, and there's all kinds of different adapted things that are assistive technology. There's something that is made to make a task accessible for someone who could not otherwise do that task, or could not otherwise do that task with the same ease as someone who didn't have that disability. And that's the important part. I think sometimes we can get comfortable with other people struggling to do something. And the goal of assistive technology is to remove that struggle and to make it as accessible and as joyful and as engaging as it is for someone who doesn't have any of those physical or cognitive or emotional, limitations. So I think that's really important. So, and I think self-care is another piece that we use a lot of assistive technology around are occupational therapists and a physical therapist, and our IT department helped me last year to 3D print some really important tools for students. So sometimes we don't think about the little things that we do independently. So for example, something as simple as brushing your teeth. If you have difficulty with your hand control, you may need a toothbrush that has a strap on it that can hold it so you can brush your teeth. You may need a little cap that goes on the end of the toothpaste so that when you squeeze it, even if you squeeze it really hard, not a ton is going to come out, just enough is going to come out. And there's tools for that. Um, and there's beautiful websites that have patterns for all those things. You can print them for free in a 3D printer. There's tools for adapting a knife so that it's a safer, it has guards on it, or adapting a key so that you can use a little screw and screw a bigger plastic handle onto a key so that a student who doesn't have, or a person who is starting to lose their dexterity and their ability to get that key into the keyhole because they can't hold it, can hold it. And so all of those pieces are considered assistive technology, and again, can prolong independence because no one wants to need someone to do everything for them. That just creates frustration and resentment. And so it's really about figuring out and finding all the tools that we can use to support people in having joyful, productive, lives. So all of those pieces. And then there is the component of what is the assistive technology? Is it on a computer? Is it on your phone? Is it part of your environment? And I'm going to go back to the hiking trails. I was on a beautiful trail in Amherst, Massachusetts, that is specifically created with guide ropes for people who have low vision or depth perception. So you kind of walk along and there's a rope along the trail and you can hold on to it and it helps you know where you're going. So I think that is those are all pieces that can help. I am gonna, I laugh at this a lot, but so my grandfather was a very tall person. He was 6'7" and he had broken his back at one point and was healed, but he put in a very tall toilet in his house because it was his house and he was this very tall person, and he was married to my grandma Carol, and my grandma Carol was is like 5'1". And so she was very short. And so he was like, well, we'll just get you steps so you can sit on the toilet. And so it was sort of like all right. So he used this assistive, like
I was just
tall
gonna say,
toilet, but then it
they both
created
had
her.
assistive
Yeah.
technology.
So it was just sort of that's a good example of how do we modify our environment. Sometimes people lower or raise counters in their house. Whoever owned my house before me must have been tall because my counters in my kitchen are taller than a typical kitchen. And I love it because you don't have to bend over as much, or you can stand and do much more than I feel like I can do in a different kitchen. But if I was not a tall person, I would not like that. And so all of these pieces, and what is the activity output for the assistive technology? What do you want to be able to accomplish? And making sure that um, it's sustainable, so that if it's something that needs batteries to be changed a lot, are you making sure that you've got rechargeable batteries? What's your system? What's your plan? So I do want to spend a minute. So I've spent a lot of time on this slide. And I have, the human piece, we kind of talked a lot about this. And then the activities, there's technology for pretty much everything. And I think, again, going back to, the age of the world that we're in now with internets and all of those pieces, you can use the screen readers that read books out loud. Well, you can read text readers that read books out loud, and then there's screen readers that will read websites and all kinds of things. So you can really do a lot of things, shopping and making shopping lists and all of those things with technology. Yes.
A quick plug for the SAU 60 app, which will also translate.
Yes. I forgot to mention that. If you are a person who is a native foreign language speaker and you're in the United States, or if you are a person who's supporting someone in learning and they may speak some English, but not fluent enough or not understand fluently enough, you can have whole passages. You can have a social studies book translated and that student can listen to it. There's guidelines and rules around that, but it's very, very doable. And I think that's really important to be thinking about, because oftentimes we have students who move here from other countries and they arrive at school, and being as rural as we are, we don't necessarily always have access to translators who speak all of the different languages of the students who've moved here. And we want to support those students in being happy and successful and joyful learners. And if we can remove that language barrier while they're learning math, while they're learning social studies, while they're learning science, of course, they're still working with a certified English language arts or English language learner teacher, on learning English. But in the meantime, we don't want them to miss any of the grade level content that they need to get. That's a really important thing. And I think that's important that we know that we have a lot of adults in our community who also have language acquisition barriers, or they're learning, they've moved here and are learning how to speak and read and use English. And in the meantime, there's so many great tools that allow them to be effective community members and engaged in work and play and all of those things. So yes, thanks. And then, I talked about these pieces. There's a place, I think it's in Nashua. I know there's one in Boston that will also adapts cars. So if, we've had students who maybe are in a wheelchair and their legs would not possibly work to press the pedal safely. They have hand controls, and there's a whole process for being assessed and getting funding for an adapted car. And that is something that, again, our occupational therapists and our recreational therapists often will work with those agencies to help support students in their independence, right? Because otherwise, we don't live in an area where we have a lot of public transportation that's easily accessible. And so how do you have that freedom, and making sure they have that. So, okay. So this is it's one example of a tool. We have different ones we may use. We have a more simplified one, but for the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to share this one. And it's from Georgia, and the Georgia's Project for Assistive Technology, otherwise known as GPAT in the assistive technology world. And this is a great tool. It's free online if you just search for the GPAT or and it's a great tool. It does not matter how old you are, what you want to be able to do, what the task is. This is a really neat little tool in that it has sort of a really nice list of what are some tools based on the task that you need to do. And I'm going to scroll through, there's 10 pages. But I just wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about this and the fact that as part of students' IEP process, it's actually a federal law as part of IDEA that we consider assistive technology, and it's in every IEP. There's a place in the special factors. Does the student need assistive technology? And so this is sort of a guide that educators can use to make decisions about that.
Yeah. And to reiterate something, I think this is more about it's the method of
Yes.
conveying what a student has learned rather than helping them. It doesn't learn it for them.
No, there's no part of this that learns it for them. These are the tools that put them on a level playing field. So if I have fine motor challenges and I cannot write because my letters are giant and it takes me so long to write, or if I have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and I need every letter to be written perfectly, or I have to erase it 5 times, that gets in the way of me sharing my knowledge. That gets in the way of me being in my in the learning environment in the same way in the same time as all of my peers. And that's really important, is that the goal of assistive technology is to take away the barriers that impact students' ability to joyfully and equally participate in learning and sharing.
Speaking of that, thank you for zooming in.
Yeah, sorry. So, we have, and I don't know how well I'll be able to navigate now that I've zoomed in. So this is, and I just want to kind of share this because I feel like this is a great tool for everyone to think about looking at, right? So if you're working with children, if you're working with adults, if you are an adult with a disability, if you are an adult who's supporting a parent who has had an acquired disability, you know, we talk about strokes or heart attacks or accidents or dementia, memory loss. There's a lot of things that impact us throughout our lifetime. You know, someone has an accident, they have a hip replaced, their body isn't doing what it used to do. This is this beautiful 10-page list of what might be helpful. And so this is what's called a consideration guide. So it's, all right, this is the area, this is the task you need to do, and the standard tools you would use to do it to. And if those things aren't working for you, what is an accommodation that you might try or a modification? And modifications, just so I'm clear, do change the outcome. They do change the what you have to do. And those are used very sparingly in the world of education because we want kids to be able to meet our standards. But in outside of school and in the world, what is the goal? What is the task that needs to be completed? And what accommodation or modification or strategies can happen? And what assistive technology solutions might you consider? Okay. And it may be that you say, oh, that might work. Let's try that. And after this consideration process, there's a process where we try things and we teach people how to use them. And then there's a reassessment of, is that working? Maybe not. Maybe we need to change it. Or yes, that's good. This child ran with this and is really independent. And that may very well be the same for people in your life. So I'm not going to read all of these, but we have writing and what standard tools, what accommodations, and what assistive tech. And then this is continues in on writing because there's it covers Braille and all those things. Then there's, if a student has great handwriting, but they struggle with spelling, here's some tools that might be helpful for spelling. And then there's reading,
Wait,
and there's a
what's a
variety of
page
tools.
fluffer?
A page fluffer. I'm glad you asked that. So sometimes people have trouble physically grasping and turning pages. So it would be something in the world of education, we might have a little clip thing that goes on each page that someone sets up beforehand so that person can be independent in turning the page. Sometimes it will be, this sounds odd, but a little puffer thing that can blow air and it'll blow a page up so a person can turn it. There's a variety of different tools that you could use, because it can be really discouraging. You're mid-sentence and you've got to turn your page and it takes you 5 minutes to turn the page because you're struggling. That's not equal access. And by the way, you have to go back and reread the last couple sentences to get where you are, and that's not equal, right? So all of these different tools. I do want to pause and just share a fun fact, and that is that there's a lot of research. These tools, so the tools that I talk about around word prediction and reading aloud and those pieces have been around for a long time. And over the years, there's been a great deal of research done. And so sometimes I have parents ask questions about, well, if my student uses that word prediction, that predictive text, isn't it going to make them never learn how to spell? And the research actually shows quite the opposite, in that their students who use the predictive text over time, as their typing becomes better, tend to stop using the buttons to get that text to pop in and start typing the words themselves because it becomes faster. And that programs through muscle memory and repeated visual exposure an increase in spelling skills. And screen readers that read text out loud and have a highlighter on, that's an important piece, have the highlighter on that highlights each word as it reads, has been shown to increase reading fluency. And so I think that's just a little small side caveat, because it is a little bit challenging for parents who don't have the experience of it being challenging to read, to process that their child is struggling. And yeah, we want to teach them how to read. And of course, we're going to always continue to work on teaching them how to read. That's why we have people who are amazing reading specialists and reading teachers and special education teachers who are trained in those things. And that's their job. And the job of assistive technology is to help students, while they're learning to read, still get access to science, social studies, math, psych, sociology, art, literature, health text, all of the things that they may be struggling to sound out and might interfere with the reading. So 2 pieces. Okay. So this just goes through and it talks about, all right, there's all these different tools you might try for reading. Then there's math. And there's all kinds of things. I've helped students with one arm be able to take geometry. And if you think about that, well, how do you use a ruler and a compass if you have one arm? Well, there's magnetic boards and there's magnetic tools that help make that possible. You just need to do a little searching and find them and get them for students, but they're out there. So study and organizational. Oh yeah, I said I was going to talk about this. See, memory. So the other component that often happens with our students, with us, with our parents is, and when we joke about stress-induced memory loss, it's kind of a we laugh about it, but it's real. Time management is real. Being able to use all those executive functioning skills of making a plan, setting the steps to make the plan happen, all of those pieces.
If we had a ton of time, I'd say, what's executive function?
Yeah.
But basically, it's being your own boss and knowing how to manage your time and tell yourself what to do.
Right. And so I think that piece, I often use the example of, well, I have 2 examples. One, you tell your child to go clean their room and they go in there and you go in half an hour later and it might be more messy because they don't have the executive functioning capacity to say, the goal is to clean my room. What's the first step? And how do I start that first step? Right? They get distracted by their dolls and now the doll clothes are all out too, or whatever, um and so the other one is I joke about, all right, we're going grocery shopping and we are going, okay, Alice, there's chats in the chat thing. I'm not sure if that's you. Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So you go, you're gonna go buy everything to make Thanksgiving dinner. You have made stuffing 1,000 times. You know all of the ingredients, but you didn't make a list. And you get home and you unpack your groceries and you're like, I don't have celery. How did I forget celery? I can't make stuffing without celery. And you have to go all the way back to the grocery store. And now your whole timeline is messed up. And you know, and so those are all executive functioning tools. So, or executive functioning skills rather. So there's a lot of study in organizational skills. I have become a huge fan of all of the tools that are on my phone and apps that are on my phone that I can use. I use the Notes app a lot. I have used in the past with my child an app called Goalie that is, I don't work for them. I'm just talking about it because I liked it. If you have a student or a child who really needs visual routines to complete things, it has an app that's the parent, and then the app that the child gets, and the child gets an app that the parent on their phone or on their iPad or whatever, and the parent can record, make little videos of the steps the child needs to do and set a timeline. And the child goes through and does one step, checks it off, does the next step, checks it off, does the next step, checks it off. And then they earn a little puzzle piece or whatever at the end. And then if they finish all of the components, they get to spend 2 minutes playing a little game. So it's sort of it, and the adult, and if you have an adult who has significant disabilities, the parent can assign caregivers. So if you have a person who's going out into a job field with your young adult, they can be assigned as a caregiver so they can make those routines, and they don't have to pause the person they're supporting and take away their device, which can be difficult to program it. You program it, you send it, and then it's on their device. So that anyway, there's all kinds of cool tools. Yeah, so highlighting, sticky notes, there, all of those things can happen. We have a great tool, one of our technology tools that I love, and students actually love when I show them, is called it's like a distraction reducer. And basically when you go onto a website that has all those side things, right? And we get distracted by, oh, there's a link about this, or there's a picture of a cute puppy. And then we're like, why can't this kid just read this article? And so there's this minimize distractions button that we have, and you press it and it eliminates all of that. It eliminates all the big stuff at the top and all the stuff on the side and just gives you the text of the article. And so that just makes it really much easier for students who, when I'm teaching kids, I jokingly say, get distracted by all the squirrels. So, because you really need to be able to focus. And that is a huge help for people who have that executive functioning, attention, and self-regulation challenge. So there's lots of tools here. Let's see, what else do we have? So study and organizational, hearing and listening. So lots of different tools here. Sometimes we'll have students who, like we talked about, the tools that we have that students may own personally, or we have bought headphones for some students. We have not bought earplugs for students. That's a personal device, thing that would need to be personally bought. But we also have students who struggle to filter out background noise that use what's called an FM system. So that's where the teacher wears a mic. And this is often for students who have auditory processing disorders, which is a neurological disorder that changes the way your brain, you can hear the sound, but it changes the way your brain makes sense of the language. That's a very simplified explanation, but some students who have specific types of auditory processing disabilities will benefit greatly from the teacher wears a mic and the student is wearing basically an earpiece over their ear that puts that teacher's voice directly into the student's ear, so that it helps them to know, oh, that's the words I'm supposed to be paying attention to right now. And so you'll see that it's also a really helpful tool for students who have hearing aids, because if any of you have hearing aids, they pick up all the background noise. And so there's FM systems that can be fed directly to certain hearing aids. And so we have students who have hearing aids who then that teacher would wear an FM system.
I think we had that at my old church.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they have it. So my prior world, I worked in a college as an assistive technology specialist, and many classrooms have them as a system. And many offices and colleges have them because professors need them to be able to hear in meetings or auditoriums. And so it's become much more universally available. Sometimes they're called a loop system. Sometimes they're called an FM system. I will say that there are things that need to happen to be able to make them be able to be used. So for example, if you have meeting rooms and they have those kind of systems, if you're having confidential meetings, you need to shut them off because people with hearing aids can accidentally be looped into a meeting that has confidential information happening, which may or may not have happened at a college that I worked at. Not that I was not in the meeting, but you know,
A cautionary tale.
yeah. So it's just to be aware of when you have a loop system that it can loop into people who are not in that room's FM system if they're in the proximity. So there's a lot of different hearing supports, and then there's, of course, oral communication and speech pieces. And oftentimes when people hear the word assistive technology, they jump right to the communication devices that humans who can't use verbal speech to communicate fully functionally. So oftentimes there's students who have some verbal speech or are still learning verbal speech and have comprehension and and a lot more to say than their motor patterns will allow them to say at the moment. Will use different either icons or communication devices or picture strips or all of those kinds of things. And sometimes there are students who have things like selective mutism, or occasionally you'll have a student who is on the autism spectrum and they can type better than they can verbally share. And so they may want to use a typing program to type the things that they might want to ask for in a store. Or maybe for a while they're learning that verbal speech, a staff person might type what they might want to say, and they may very well then read it out loud in a setting. So I've definitely worked with students who they have a sentence strip or that they read when they want to order their food, because a parent can help them figure out what they want to eat, but that student can still have the ability to ask the waitress for it. So all kinds of different things that can be used for that oral communication. And then there's some examples, and again, none of these are exhaustive. You know, I like this tool and I wanted to share it because I feel like as we think about assistive technology, it helps us to have a list of, oh, I never thought about this for myself, for my child, for my parent, for my cousin, and what if they tried this, or, those kinds of things. How do we help people be as independent? So activities of daily living, and yeah, adapted eating, adaptive dressing. I mean, everyone kind of jokes about everybody's grandfather has the shoehorn sitting around somewhere, that help them put their boots on or their
They're
shoes on.
awesome.
I know, right? They're way better as a tool than they were as a sword when I was a kid. So all of these kinds of things, we often use assistive technology with people who have had medical needs temporarily, adapted toileting equipment, all of those kinds of things. These may also be picture sequences for any kinds of things. So it might be that you have someone who wants to be able to use the microwave to heat up a certain microwave meal that they really like, or food that's been frozen, but they struggle with figuring out how to put the right numbers in or read it from the tiny box. And so it may be, I've made lists before on a big sheet where I've taken a picture of that microwave setting. So that they can put in the right time and have a bigger model. And then again, I talked a lot about recreation and leisure, and because it's really important, because joy is really important. And there's far too many people in our world who are struggling with depression and loneliness because they have disabilities and they feel like they can't do things that if they had some assistive technology, they could do. And so there's a whole variety of things here. And then there's vocational tools. And again, we have a great Voc Rehab. I think in our area, we have Pathways, we have Voc Rehab, we have Monadnock Developmental Services, who really are excellent at helping students have all of these kinds of work tools. And that Job Accommodation Network website can help guide those decisions. And yeah, seating, position, and mobility. Again, adapted seating, standing, chairs, all of those things. So that's this. I'm going to quickly slide it back up to the top so you can see it's called the Georgia Project for Assistive Technology. It's a beautiful tool. It's probably been around for like 25 years or so. And yeah, there's that. I think I have a few resources, but that's sort of the end of my, the last thing I did want to share, SAU 60. There is a variety of little short videos that will teach you all kinds of things about assistive technology, and really is about what we have available here, and has a section for parents and helping understand and advocate, and a section for students. And so it's really got a lot of, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of embedded videos, because you can have text, but if you're not a strong reader, that's not how you learn, then there's a video there to support that learning as well. So that is sort of my little spiel. And I hope that this was helpful and that you've learned something cool and new about assistive technology and how it might help you across your lifespan and across the different areas in your life, so that things can be accessible and easy and joyful. Thanks.